Hi there, I'm Linda Bansalvi. Welcome to my studio. I'm going to do a short little tutorial here on mounting this acrylic painting that's painted on watercolor paper. I'm going to mount it to my board, which I've already prepared. This is a cradled wood panel, and I painted the sides with black gesso. It's a wood panel all the way around. It's a birch, this surface is birch, and so I've painted the outside with black gesso, and I've painted the surface with white gesso. When I'm using oil and cold wax, I paint on this surface, so I just prepare all of my panels like this because I like to start with the white of the board, creating transparent layers, so that's why I do that. When you're mounting a piece of paper onto the board, it doesn't really matter what color the gesso is. If I wanted to, I could mount it. If this was black gesso, it wouldn't really matter. The idea of coating it, there's at least 3 coats of gesso on here. The reason for coating it with gesso is that it seals the wood so that the acids don't migrate up to your painting surface. So I've got a good rigid support here that's going to be a permanent solution for mounting my watercolor paper. And this is acrylic on watercolor paper in this case. And I will mount it with gel medium. And I like to use this Liquitex brand. It's matte gel medium, nice and thick. We're getting down to the bottom of the barrel there, but it looks kind of whitish, but it dries clear, and it's matte, so it's not going to be shiny. It's a very good glue for bonding the watercolor paper to the board, and it's permanent. Once you've done that and it's dried, you're not going to be removing that. So it would be as if I painted this painting directly onto the wood board, except there's the layer of the cotton rag paper in between. And I use the artist quality cotton rag paper. There's several brands I use. I like Winsor & Newton, and I like Saunders Waterford 200 pound. It's what I often paint on. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to remove this painting, and I'm going to prepare the surface of my board with the gel medium. So I have a brush here that is just a hardware store brush, and it's got a little bit of an angle, but that doesn't really matter. So it's just a 1.5 inch hardware store brush so that I can apply the gel medium. So I'm just going to scoop in here and get a good amount on my brush. And I'm just going to start applying it. And I kind of do a crisscross motion. When I come to the edge of the panel, I just sort of go over the edge so that I want to make sure that I have enough of the gel medium to create a solid bond when I go to put my painting on. So I just paint it on, and I'm just careful not to have it drip over the edge, but it's gel, so it doesn't usually drip. It's not the liquid one. That's why I like the gel one. It's a little bit thicker. You can put a good coat of it on, and it will create an amazingly strong bond with the paper to the board. So this will just take me a minute to do. I'm just making sure not too much there. All right, so that whole strip there has a good coating, and I look from an angle a little bit just to make sure I didn't miss any areas. And then I go down to the next strip over the edges. And I do a couple passes to make sure I really work it into the board well, because I want this to be a nice permanent application, that it's just going to be solid. There's not going to be any air pockets. I'll show you how I put that on. Kind of do a crisscrossy thing. There we go. If a little goes over the edge, it doesn't really matter. You can just smooth it off with your finger or the brush because it's matte. This is a matte black gesso, so it's not going to show. And I'll tell you what I do afterwards. Once I've mounted the piece, I will varnish the whole piece with acrylic varnish to seal the whole sides, the sides of the painting as well as the surface. I kind of like doing this in my studio. It's just kind of relaxing and you don't have to think too much. I've already figured out the process for myself and I've been doing this for quite a few years, so I know that it works and that you know, there's never any lifting of the painting. It's totally bonded. It's this Liquitex gel medium is an amazing product. I quite like it. And I don't have any affiliation with Liquitex. I'm not there working for them. This is just me as an artist letting you know what I like to use. And just make sure I get the whole surface evenly, and no, I don't want a big thick glop because then I'm going to end up squishing that out the sides. I'll show you in a minute. Okay. Doesn't have to be beautiful, but I want it even and a consistent surface so that the contact of the paper is even. Okay, so I think looking through this whole thing, that looks pretty good, yep. Okay, so I'm just going to put my brush into the medium here because I'm going to do a second one in a minute. I'm doing two at the same time. I will show you this one. You don't need to watch me do two, I don't think. So this is my painting and this is the back of it. It's just the cotton rag paper, but you can see that my fingerprints and acrylic has gotten to the back. I don't tape my paper down when I paint with acrylics. So I'm just going to want to put it down fairly evenly. This painting is almost the size of the board. And I'm just adjusting it. This edge here is pretty much bang on. I might have to do a little trim along one spot here with the X-Acto knife after. But I want a little overhang on this edge and a little overhang on this edge because it's a deckled edge, which is quite nice, but I'm going to have it trimmed so it's very smooth. Okay, so I just position it and then I press it down. When I find the spot that I like, I'll start in the middle and move out. I usually just go with my hands a little bit like this. Make sure you have clean hands with no paint on it. And I'm just a brayer, speedball, it's a rubber roller. And I'll just go, I'm pressing up, a little bit. Let's go move that over a little from the pressure that you're putting and all of that. And the other thing is when you go off, I go right off the edge. So sometimes you might get a little bit of, I don't know if you can see right here, there's a little bit of gel squishing out. And I don't want to pick that up on the roller and then put it back onto the painting. So that's another good reason to have the paper. And I'm just going to give a little run up this edge. Going on here, do that edge. Okay, so now I'm going to move this over there, do the same thing. Just making sure there's no air bubbles underneath, and then I'm getting a good bond with the acrylic. And that's why it's important not to put big globs of acrylic, otherwise you'll have it squishing out like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Which I don't think is what you want. Okay, so this side is pretty well bonded. I'm going to go over this edge again. I'm going to be cutting with an X-Acto knife later. All right, so we'll do this half. It's not rocket science, you just be methodical about how you're doing it from the middle outwards. And I'm putting a firm pressure. I don't want to totally get rid of all the, I don't want to squish it all out from the edges, but I think I pretty much figured out the amount to put on after all these years, that doesn't happen too much. Okay, so I'm just feeling with my fingers. I'm kind of a braille kind of girl. I like to know what's going on here with my hands. All right, so it feels totally secure here. So this will take usually about 24 hours to dry or so. Depends on the humidity in your environment. I'm in air conditioning here in my inside studio. So I'm gonna wait till tomorrow at least before I varnish this with a satin finish varnish, and I go all the way over to the edge. So now that I'm at this point, I checked my edges here, and I just want to make sure that any little bits like this, I just lift off. And just make sure that that bond, it's not totally great right there, so I'm going to go over it again. Just making sure. Sometimes I use a J cloth that's been dampened, and then see there's a big glob right there. So I will just go, I'll dampen that with a little water. And I'm just going to go around my table so I can reach this side a little better. And I'm just going underneath in case there's a little bit of gel medium that's squished out a bit on that edge too much. So I'm just checking my corners, making sure that that is adequate. Yeah, that felt good when I lifted it. Okay, while it's still wet, you have time to adjust. You could, if you say, oh, it's really not good on one of the edges, you have time to adjust that, or the corners, you know, can do a little adjustments while it's still wet. If you squished out too much of that gel medium right on the corner, I'm just putting a little bit more under there, just to be safe. Make sure it bonds well. And I'm going to take that paper away so I can actually see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to do one pass to make sure that I get that. I'm just using my fingers. Sometimes I wear gloves when I'm painting really messy. Usually I'm not that messy doing this process. There we go. Just make sure there's no acrylic on here. And I'm just going to make sure that edge is bonded well. Clean. Good. It's feeling good. Okay. Good. So you do have time to play with this till it's dry. Okay, so that's it. I feel the edges are nice and secure all the way around. There's nothing that feels like a pocket. It's nice and level, firm. And so what you can do is you can put it upside down onto a board or whatever, I'm just showing you, and put some weights down if you like. I don't find you really need to, but you can put a bucket of something in here just to make sure it keeps a firm contact while it's drying. And then the edge along that's a little bit too fat, that overlaps, I'm just gonna cut that with an X-Acto knife. You can do that once it's completely dry. That way you don't risk moving your painting a little bit while it's still wet. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna let this dry. I'll move it over to my other board. And then tomorrow I will trim the edges. Oops, I have it upside down for your viewing. So tomorrow I will trim the edges on this side, and there's one little overlap here that I didn't do a very good job when I cut it. And then I will varnish the whole thing all the way over to the edges, and then put picture wire in the back, and voila! Painting mounted on cradled wood panel. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.